Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a three principle. Like, for instance, there are many templates you could make that would have two lifts, two primary lifts. The issue is this, is stress, right? So at the completion of starting strength novice linear progression, which is marked by the failure of the starting strength novice linear progression to produce an increase within the time interval allowed, right, which is 48 hours. At that point that it no longer happens, you are saying, I do not respond to that training with a commensurate increase in my performance, which means you need more stress. That is the base, that's like the fundamental principle. So the thought, for instance, that you don't have enough recovery to deal with the stress is, I think, a fundamental error as well, because that shapes how you perceive and therefore manage the problem. If you thought it was a recovery problem, for instance, you just wouldn't train for the next week, right? You would train less and still progress. In fact, you would, and then if that again was if that was your fundamental truth, you would train less and less and less and less until you wouldn't train at all, and then you would somehow still get stronger, right? So again, that is a fundamental error, I think, that is made or is misunderstood perhaps. So once you have said, I'm no longer responding to the starting strength novice linear progression, and there are no reasons by which I am self-sabotaging myself, i.e. 3-minute rest periods, i.e. I'm losing massive amounts of weight, i.e. I have some disease process that is otherwise compromising my ability to respond to training, which, you know, perhaps. So for viewers at home, not to break HIPAA, even though we're not in this country, or in the United States, this particular person does have an issue where he's taking a medication that would compromise his ability to respond to training. In any event, the baseline principle is the same. Stress has to increase. Now, if you were in a time crunch situation where you don't have enough time to train on a given day to get 3 lifts in 3 times per week, I would train more times per week. I would train 4 times per week and try to do that and get the same amount of weekly volume. It's the same amount of weekly stress is ideally what you're trying to do, particularly as an intermediate, because now your stress recovery adaptation cycle is longer, right? You have to accumulate stress over a longer period of time. Arbitrarily, we call this a week, right? And then you recover within that week as well, and then adapt. You can showcase that you've adapted the next week. That's what I would do. So I would take your standard 3 lift per day, 3-day-a-week template, and turn it into 4 days a week, however many, things you get.
Can you train 4 days a week? Or
yeah, it's not the amount of days I can, it's the time for each one. Yep. But then I guess the problem, without thinking about too much, is if the lifts would back up.
It's fine. It's fine. Well, yeah, because again, you're not necessarily looking for day-to-day performance increases, because now you are saying I am an intermediate. Yeah. You're looking for week-to-week performance increases as an early intermediate, and as a later intermediate, it might be 2-week to 2-week performance increases. So in reality, the weight on the bar matters little. The overall stress matters more. Now, yeah, we'd like to see the weight on the bar go up each time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the most important thing. The most important thing is getting the correct amount of stress. So if, for instance, you go up from the previous week, right, in weight, and you're like, hell yeah, I just PR'd, but it was the wrong amount of stress that within the entire context of the program subsequently does not lead to a performance improvement, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. So yeah, my recommendation would be that you would train more days per week and get the total amount of weekly stress in. If it wasn't possible to train more, right, then at that point I would try to figure out some time efficient process to generate a lot of stress. So things we use are myo reps, time sets, so where you have 10 minutes, for instance, to use a 12 rep max sort of load on a lift, and you do as many reps as possible without ever going to failure. You're just jamming a bunch of stress in a short period of time. Now that's not optimal, and even if you didn't have enough time to do that, then you'd say, do you have enough time to train to get better? Because at some point you'll run up against that, right? Again, if the underlying fundamental reason why you stop getting stronger on novice linear progression is that you cannot generate enough stress, to drive an adaptation. At some point, you're training 4 days a week or 5 days a week with 3 lifts per day and a ton of reps and whatever, and you're not getting any better, guess you're going to need more. And that's not accessible for everybody, right? So there's a reason why the highest level athletes, particularly in the barbell sports, train very, very frequently. They have to. It's not by choice. They don't want to squat 16 times a week if they're an Olympic lifter. They have to get better. But anyway, so that's what I would do in your situation. And I don't mean to overtalk Tom, I just want to make sure that the fundamental is understood, that the reason the starting strength novice linear progression stops working is because it's not enough stress. It's not your recovery. It can't be, because again, you would stop training and get better. I mean, I don't understand. I don't see another way to understand that.
I think that you are largely correct.
All right. Hype me up.
Because I mean, three sets of 5 will stop working,
Yep.
and eventually, you do need a larger stressor, but you're essentially working at such a high intensity level that you cannot essentially accumulate enough work.
So what you could do is decrease the reps that you do. Instead of 3 sets of 5, you do 3 sets of 3, and the weight on the bar will go up for a few weeks. But it's not because you've gotten any stronger. It is because you are reducing the total amount of stress, and you're able to display strength that you've previously built. We call this peaking. And let's say that works for about 2 or 3 weeks, which is generally how long you could hope to milk that out on an actual novice that doesn't have other stuff going on. At the end of the 3 weeks, where you finally say, I am no longer responding to this type of stress, you have now detrained the novice because they're dealing with less overall work throughout the week, right? You have beaten them up sufficiently, all right? And for what? For an extra 15 pounds on a squat that in 6 months you would not know the difference. If anything, you've put them back, because they're now training on a higher volume, more intermediate program. You've set them back on their ability to tolerate that sort of training. So for their long-term development, you may have compromised that. This is, again, a fundamental sort of thing. Peaking for a novice is silly. If you're going to a meet and the meet means something, sure. But if you're not going to a meet, why would you peak? It doesn't make sense to me, right?
And another potential thing you could do is higher set of 5 and then still keep volume the same, but you back it off a little. There's still elements of peaking in that.
Because you're reducing the total stress.
I don't know that it's a strict either or. You're probably still getting a little stronger, but to your point, you're probably getting less acclimated to volume, and that may require a deload and some backing up. So like a lot of the things you can do, there's ways of smoothly transitioning from novice to intermediate, and then there's ways that are less smooth, and
Yep. My fear would be to significantly drop volume in that situation, because your work capacity would go down. You're not actually getting any stronger. You're just demonstrating previously developed strength, which is, again, this is a fundamental principle of programming. Changing the goalposts mid-program, like 5-3-1 does. Okay, so 5-3-1, you do 5s for a week, then 3s for a week, then 1s for a week. And it's like, well, the weight went up, I got stronger. It's like, well, no, you just changed the test. The test was 5s, then it was 3s, and then it was 1s. Are you strong? If your set of 1 is 20 pounds stronger than your set of 5, did you get any stronger? I don't know. Because week 1, you may have been able to do that, right?